Oh. Hey there, booktube, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to A Closer Book. The Star Side of Bird Hill by Naomi Jackson, set in Barbados. 16-year-old Dion and her 10-year-old sister Phaedra have been living in Brooklyn with their mother, who's been having some mental issues. She's lost her job. Their father, her husband, has abandoned the family. So in order to deal with the issue, the mother sends the two girls to spend the summer holidays with their grandmother so they can return to Brooklyn for school in the fall. What happens next is the summer that they will never forget. Everything that could go wrong in these girls' lives does. Dion is at a time in her life where she's looking for validation from men. At 16 years old, she's at a point where she is allowing herself to get caught up in relationships with the neighborhood boys because she's looking for some kind of male appreciation. Phaedra at 10 years old is still reeling from probably not having a really good childhood. Mother seems to have been very distant, very cold towards her. While her older sister was serving as some kind of surrogate mother while they were in Brooklyn, she has now kind of ditched her and their relationship has changed. And so everything that they have come to know as their foundation has been rocked. I ended up rating this book 3 stars. 3 things that I liked. I thought the length of the book was pretty good, even though I didn't like all the things that happened. There was a certain point where I felt like the story should have ended and it didn't, and then I didn't like the ending, but that's later. I like the cover. I thought the cover was really attractive. I was drawn to it in the library. Very colorful. In our costumes, in our dress, in our flag, in our food, in our day-to-day lives, there's a lot of color in the West Indies. I like that this book was so colorful and it popped. I love the picture on the front, which I think is a caricature of the author herself. If I'd seen this book in the bookstore, I'd have bought it just for the cover alone. So that was 1 star. Another thing is, I've never read a book that was set in Barbados. And I like seeing things in the fiction that my friends who are Bajans talk about. I like the depiction of some aspects of the Caribbean culture where you could see that even though people had differences of opinions, or there were issues between families, that in times of grief, in times of loss, that people from the community rallied around in support, which I thought was an accurate depiction of what actually happens in the West Indies. That was another star for me. What I didn't like about the book was extremely sad. There wasn't a happy thing that happened to these girls. Everything that could go wrong in these girls' lives did. A very popular technique in novel writing is to kill off a character. Some writers do it well, where they allow the reader to form a relationship with the character, and then the loss of the character will be some kind of an emotional tearjerker, allowing the story to move forward in such a way that the main character can become a hero or heroine. In this book, several characters died in tragic ways, in some of the most tragic ways that you can imagine a character dying. And there were times when the death had no purpose. One of the things that really bothers me about the use of that technique is that I think when writers do it, that they should leave a way of escape for the characters. The mother's character is portrayed as very weak, which I thought was the antithesis of all the West Indian women that I know. I am a proud West Indian woman myself, consider myself to have very strong character, and I really dislike seeing the portrayal of a woman who would have started off with the kind of background that she did, would have had the gifts that she did, and would allow her life to just kind of spiral out of such control to the point where even though she had a strong support system, she would not be able to regain herself, be able to regain her composure. I really didn't like that in this book. Given my background in Jamaica, I assume most West Indians experience some kind of similarity, similar culture, similar background. And there were just some things that just didn't work for me. So I thought some of the situations were unrealistic. I didn't think that there were distinct voices for each character. So I gave this book 3 stars. I would love to see what else this author comes out with next, and I'd like to check out something else from her later. Is it even really okay to call this a book? Adulthood is a Myth is a Sarah Scribbles collection. This was the first in a projected series, I suppose, by Sarah Andersen. It is a comic. It's 109 pages of comic fun, pure comic fun. What I loved about this book, there's texture on the cover. There's felt, raised felt. The red on the sweater is also red felt. They carried a striped theme onto the spine. This is not felt. I love the cartoons. It was very fun and very funny. See the red and white. It's just such a beautiful book. The visual representation is just so wonderful. The book addresses a lot of issues that have to deal with being an adult, dealing with adult responsibilities, and sometimes not feeling like you are ready or equipped to handle everything that comes with being an adult. Adulthood is a myth is the idea that even though you've gotten to the age where people consider you to be an adult, you really don't feel like being responsible. You really don't feel like getting up every day and going to the grind and waking up early and doing all these things that you're supposed to do, because you just kind of want to lay around, veg out, spend all weekend in bed, that kind of stuff. So love the book. I'm going to share with you some of the pictures, some of my favorite comics. One is the 5 phrases that make my blood run colder than ice. First one is, we need to talk. 2, hey, can I ask you a question? Number 3, do you remember that time you, nope, and she runs away. I thought that was so funny. Can I see you for a second? And you're like, alone? And number 5, you should sit down. I'm fine standing here frozen in fear. Thanks. I love this one, how you feel before and after the holidays. Me before the holidays, she looked regular, kind of small. Me after the holidays, I don't even fit in the panel. She's so fat, she can't fit into the cartoon comic panel. This book is just so funny. I gave it a 4-star rating because this is not my usual genre. And while I thought it was really funny, I don't know if it qualifies as a book, so I'm taking it anyway. Book number 12 is See Now Then by Jamaica Kincaid. This is the second Jamaica Kincaid novel that I'm reading in 2017, and we're only in February. What's up with that? Jamaica Kincaid is an Antiguan writer living and writing in the United States. For a number of years, she lived in New York, but now she lives in Vermont. While I was reading this book, I did some research on her. I read her Wikipedia page and found out a lot of the things that I had originally thought from reading her previous book, Mr. Potter, are actually true. I found out that a lot of the books, a lot of her writing is autobiographical. It has to be. See Now Then is a representation of a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Sweet, and they are having marital issues. To use a euphemism, they are not happily married. Mr. Sweet hates his wife and fantasizes about her dying so he can get rid of her in his life. Mrs. Sweet is, of course, Jamaica Kincaid, because it's autobiographical, right? So Mrs. Sweet is this sweet woman who is just so innocent, and she's just home waiting on her husband, and all these things that he says about her, she doesn't really think those things about him. And oh my goodness, how could Mr. Sweet think that she could ever think a bad thought about him? Yeah, right. Jamaica Kincaid is a West Indian woman. We are strong characters, strong females, okay? Mrs. Sweet is one of those passive-aggressive women who uses her domestic capabilities to express her aggression. So she converted to Judaism. Her husband is a self-proclaimed deathbed Catholic. And so what does she do? When his socks have holes in it, she mends them, but mends them with a Jewish star, the Jewish Star of David. So even though she's not saying you should convert to Judaism, she's putting herself, she's putting her character on top of his. The first time we meet Mr. Sweet, he's playing in this concert hall, but the event is not well attended. and he is thinking how much his wife is responsible for that. He blames her for his inability to succeed in his profession. Apparently she's forced them out of the life in New York, which, if you know, New York is the center, it's the hub for all things cultural, all things musical. For a concert pianist, for a classical musician, New York City is the place to be. While he is there watching the people in the concert hall, people who've come to his concert because maybe it's the only ticket in town, but they're not really interested in his music, they're not real fans, and so he blames this on her. And while he's out, while he's heading home, he fantasizes that he'll go home and find her severed head on the counter and her body long disposed of someplace. He only wants the head to be there as proof she is now out of his life and can't come back. The book is told in classic Jamaica Kincaid style. She uses repetition very loosely, so she says a lot of the same thing over and over and over. She tells you that she lives in this house and she is this mother to her son Heracles and her daughter Persephone, and she has this husband who is supposed to be Mr. Sweet but is not really doing the things that he's supposed to do. There's a scene in the book where she plays Mr. Sweet versus Heracles, his son, and talks about him accidentally removing his genitalia and tossing it into the sea to some deep places in the sea where it can never be recovered. Now you know that that is metaphoric for the fact that even though Mr. Sweet is supposed to be the man in her life, Heracles, her son, replaces him. And this is one of the themes that comes through from Greek and Roman mythology, which is the whole Oedipus and Electra complex. In the title, now is of course the present and then is the past. See now then being, if you had been able to see the present from some time in the past, how differently would you make your decisions? How would that impact the choices that you make? Would you still marry the same person if you knew that they were going to force you to abandon your dream? Would you still do some of the things if you could see into the future? This book is an examination of time. Time is a very important theme in the book because it juxtaposes who a person is with who they were, and kind of shows you the difference between how a person got to be where they were and maybe what would have happened if they'd made another choice. Mr. Sweet is a white American male, and Mrs. Sweet is a West Indian immigrant who he marries, it seems, out of love. She talks about it in the book why they got married, but based on who they become, the reader kind of wants to know, why would these people get married when they're so different? And Mr. Sweet, in talking about Mrs. Sweet, he talks about how she arrived on this banana boat, and which is something that they talk about West Indians, that West Indians used to immigrate to the United States in these cargo ships. He uses that to kind of reduce her as a person because she came here into the country not as a person, she came as a thing, and he's the one who elevated her. She is indebted to him for everything that she is, because here it is, he gave her personhood. I gave it 4 stars because, number one, I really enjoyed Jamaica Kincaid's writing style and I felt like it was consistent in this book. Number two, I thought that the story, even if it was lacking in plot development, I felt like the story was well told because I connected with the story, I connected with the character. Not that there was an actual novel type storyline, but because she did move back and forth, but there were characters that you felt like you started to understand and sympathize with, whether you sympathize with the man or the woman. Number three, I like the way she pulled together all the themes, the mythology, the time, the relationship issues. And number four, because there were a lot of passages in here that I felt were quotable, I felt were applicable to lots of different situations. I like that the book made me think, so I gave it 4 stars. I did take a star away for a couple of reasons. Number one being, I didn't understand in the book what really happened to the daughter. For a while I thought the daughter was dead because the book talks about Mr. Sweet carrying her around in his pocket, which I felt like maybe it meant she had died and she was a memory. Now that I know that the story itself isn't fictional, I felt like some of the holes in the story were just meant to protect certain people, which didn't resolve the issues in the fiction. So I ended up rating it 4 stars. So that's today's installment of A Closer Book. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these titles and what you thought about them. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll catch you later. Bye.